Back here on the Rich Eisen Show is my Hall of Fame friend. I have not spoken to him since I saw him in his beautiful jacket with his bust. He's Pro Football Hall of Famer Joe Thomas back here on the program. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for having me on the show.
Come on, man. I saw what you tweeted out, and I just wanted to, first of all, it's been too long since I've had you. What's your opinion of this play?
I love it. I think it's interesting. It has given us something to talk about. It's captivated all of America because of how effective it's been. But also, I think how the other teams that have tried to replicate it have not been able to do it. Because at the beginning of the season, people were saying, wow, we need to ban this play. It's unstoppable. It's not football-like. But as soon as you saw those other teams try to do it and fail, then I think everybody said, whoa, wait a minute. We can't ban this play because it's just the Eagles' execution of it that has made it so perfect. It's not the fact that it's some unstoppable play.
So then why is it so difficult to copycat it in this copycat league, Joe?
Well, the Eagles' offensive line is probably the biggest, most physical offensive line in the NFL.
Mhm.
One. Two, their quarterback's, 240 pounds?
Right.
And now, also, they've had a lot of practice at it. It's something that I don't see a lot of teams lining up in training camp and doing this against each other. So I do think there is a learning curve, clearly. And the ability for the Eagles to have executed it properly a bunch of times in game-like scenarios where you're going live, I think it gives them the understanding of like the little minutia of the technique that it takes to be able to execute a play that's only trying to get a foot or two.
And so, you mean you just heard Nick Sirianni say it's 1st and 9 for his team. So what an advantage, clearly, right? 1st and 9 for your team. So why wouldn't other teams practice it? Why wouldn't they figure out, let's just say somebody's right guard is particularly talented next to a center and go there in the same way that clearly Hurts is going to the left side pretty much every single time in between Dickerson and their future Hall of Famer. You're going to have a bust gallery roommate in Jason Kelsey one day. I think you can agree. So why don't other teams do that? Why don't they get the guys and practice it as long as it is legal, Joe?
I could see maybe next training camp teams trying to practice this, but to do that in the season, I think the injury risk is just way too high to try to line your guys up and go at it one after the other with the tush push or the brotherly shove during the season, because you also do have a ton of other stuff to work on. And can you imagine if reports came out that like some critical players, like your quarterback maybe, got injured in the middle of the season because you're trying to master the brotherly shove?
Right. Yeah. That would be a headline grabber, to say the least. So what's your philosophy on how to stop it? What would you do?
Yeah, well, I think what you need to do is you need to try to force them to do something else, right? Like you mentioned, like they haven't really thrown out of it. So let's force them to try to throw out of it. And what you want to do is basically what happens is the offensive and defensive lines are just creating a pile. And then it's almost like if you ever seen those hotels in Japan that are just these little tubes that are stacked on top of each other. Basically, the first level of tubes is your offensive and defensive lineman carcasses that are laying on the ground. And then the pushers for the Eagles are grabbing Jalen Hurts' carcass and sticking him up into the second floor tube and pushing him through that airspace that now is only occupied by the linebackers from the defense. And it's unfair because nobody's pushing those guys, right? So I think the first thing that you want to do is you want to get a push on the defensive lineman's tush, right? So you line up like they used to do with the field goal block, where you get your linebackers behind and they're actually pushing the tush of the defensive lineman in front of them, right? So you have pushes going against each other. So you're trying to create a pile and maybe at least stop the surge from the Eagles offensive line. And then the guys, as soon as things get stopped and you see Jalen Hurts getting pushed over the top, that's when those linebackers need to push Jalen Hurts back, right? But most importantly, you need to put players on the edge to be able to spike down as quickly as possible to knock the pushers off of Jalen, because that's really the key to this play. It's not that Jalen is able to keep his legs moving and work his way over the top. It's that he's actually getting his body pushed over the top of all these bodies that are laying on the ground. So what you need to do is go and tackle the pushers. And I know people will say, well, it's holding, you're not allowed to tackle a blocker. Well, those guys aren't blocking. They're pushing Jalen Hurts. So if you have guys on the edge or big linebackers or maybe even some big defensive ends, and you just have them spike down the edge as soon as the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line wedge, you can maybe knock those pushers off to be able to stop them from pushing Jalen Hurts over the top of the pile.
Okay, so let me take this one at a time. First of all, love the analogies.
Hope you wrote it down.
No, Joe, love the analogies. Amazing. So while So it's not about who's the lowest. Is that what you're saying? Because you see some of these defenders get down, like basically like their chests are almost damn near on the ground, that they're prone. You know, like those drills that we see at the combine where sometimes they start, you know, on their chest and have to jump up and then run around. You're like, well, you're never in that position. It seems like defenders are getting down low. So you're saying it's not, if you get down that low, you're helping the Eagles because they're creating the space for Hurts to basically body surf on top of the line that's protecting him or blocking for him, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Joe?
So at first, the Eagles' offensive line was just lower than everybody, right? So they were getting this tremendous surge, but then everybody realized what was coming. So now they told their defensive linemen, we used to call it root hog, basically just get lower than them. And if you create a pile, that's okay, because now there's just a big pile and nobody else is blocking each other. But the Eagles use that to their advantage because now Jalen Hurts is body surfing on those bodies. So he's not touching the ground. So he's not going to be down, right?
Yeah.
So then that's where the push comes into play, where the Eagles, you know, running backs or tight ends that are in the backfield picking up Jalen Hurts, they're pushing him over the top of those bodies and he's not touching the ground. So you got to be able to stop that body surf. It's not about being lower because the pile has already been created in front. So it's getting those pushers off of Jalen Hurts in any way possible so they can't body surf his body across the first down marker.
So you would be running the risk if you do put people, as you said, like back in the day, the type of field goal block scheme. If you're just blocking your big body defensive line, you know, D tackles, if you're putting those folks out there, you are running the risk of maybe them pulling it and like pop passing it, right? Like, is that the this is fascinating to me because this is the way this is going to go, and we're going to see this in a big, huge game, Joe. This is going to happen in November and December. For sure.
Yeah, I guarantee the Eagles have practiced the other iterations of, okay, you know, when people stop this, what do we do? Okay, we fake the push, then we just have a little pop pass, or we fake it and then we, you know, throw some jet sweep or some option play where we can pitch it to somebody running around. And certainly you're going to have your safeties as safety valves to be looking for some of those things when you're on defense. But I think if you're going to try to stop this, you got to try to sell out just the same way that the Eagles are trying to sell out to get it. And I think that's the only way you can do it. But that's what's exciting about this play. And that's why I don't want it banned and outlawed, because there's so many iterations that we haven't even got to yet that are going to be so fun for us to explore as this thing evolves.
So which team do you think defensively is best equipped to do what you're saying? You know, just if you go through a roster, I mean, they just played the Rams for crying out loud, right? I mean, there's Aaron Donald on the other side of it. Who do you think has the ability with the bodies to stop this thing? Joe.
Good question.
Thank you.
I haven't studied everybody's size and weights on the defensive lines and linebacker, but
right.
I would say that actually having huge defensive linemen, that's great, but I think having those big linebackers on the second level might actually be more critical to be able to initially push the defensive line, go over the top to try to stop Jalen Hurts, and then having big bodies on the outside, or at least fast guys, to be able to get to those pushers and either tackle them or knock them off the push would potentially be the most important skills of these players that are going to be out there on the defense.
Joe Thomas here on the Rich Eisen Show. If I'm not mistaken, your last year in Cleveland was Myles Garrett's first. Is that the
correct?
Okay. What was he like? I mean, he's an absolute, complete, total monster beast. I cannot wait to chat with him. He's slated to appear on our show Friday. What was he like showing up off the campus of Texas A&M back in the day?
I can't remember ever getting beat by a rookie, but I do remember very, very distinctly the first time I lined up against Myles Garrett. He literally ran right around me and sacked the quarterback on a screenplay, might I add. And that's when I realized, like, this guy is just made a little bit differently. He's in a different class of human beings. And I'm hoping that you saw the field goal block that he had against the Colts, which is something that I don't think we've ever seen in NFL history. And I don't know if we'll ever see again because of the rules where, as a defensive lineman, he has to line up within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. He has to jump high enough to be able to get over all of the field goal blockers, but also far enough from a standstill to be able to not touch them as he's leaping through the air, land on the ground with a lot of force, because it takes a lot of force to take 275 pounds in the air, 60 inches to jump far and high over the blockers on the field goal. And then as soon as you hit the ground, the reactivity in his feet to be able to jump back up into the air with enough speed to be able to block a field goal. I honestly when I watch it every time, I'm amazed. He's the most freakish athlete that I've ever been on a football field with. And the play that he had blocking that field goal against the Colts, I don't even know if we'll ever see him doing it again, because guys will be prepared for it. And all they have to do is touch him, and it's a penalty. And the offense gets a first down then.
Yeah, and I imagine an offensive lineman seeing an opponent practice his crossover dribble pre-snap would cause you to say, get out of here with this. But I imagine that's got to be intimidating, sort of like, Jason in a hockey mask coming around the corner. You know what I mean? Like, that's got to resonate pre-snap, Joe, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I'm changing my shorts when I get to the sideline. And can you imagine he's doing this over guys that are on the inside that don't usually see guys with that quickness? And the first sack of his career actually came where he was lined up over a guard, and he just cross-faced. He didn't do the crossover dribble with his hands, but he did the crossover dribble with his legs. And his ability to change direction, where he can just step quickly with his right foot, put that foot in the ground, and then go from the B gap all the way to the A gap, or even the far A gap. He covers so much ground. It's like he's teleporting from one side of the line of scrimmage to the other. And for these guards, like Aaron Donald's the quickest guy that played defensive tackle probably in NFL history. Yeah. But when Myles lines up right there, he's quicker than Aaron Donald with his ability to cross over and change gaps.
He's amazing, and a large reason, obviously, why the Browns are 4-2. Deshaun Watson, day-to-day, as termed by Kevin Stefanski, before he went out of the game against the Colts, he just didn't look good at all. I mean, straight up. And P.J. Walker is looking fine enough, I guess is the only words to say. What are your, in the Browns defense? I know Gardner Minshew had his day, but we just talked about Myles Garrett. What is your opinion of the Browns' viability to win this division and make some particular playoff hay, Joe?
I think it was the first 4 weeks of the season they lost the turnover battle, and they were 2-2. So what that tells me is that if they can take care of the football, this defense is so good that they're going to be in every game, no matter what their offense does. And obviously, I think everybody hopes Deshaun Watson's going to be able to come back and be healthy, because if they want to win the Super Bowl and make a run, they need to have legitimate play from the quarterback position. But to your point, he was 1 for 5 with an interception and 5 yards in that game before he got injured and left the game. So they were still able to win that one with P.J. Walker. They beat the Niners the week before with P.J. Walker. And really, I think until they play the high-end guys, the best teams in the AFC, they're going to need to be able to have really good defensive play. And they're also going to have a great job of just taking care of the football. I'm playing old school football. Run the ball, take care of the ball, play special teams battles, and hope that your defense is going to continue to play at the level that they've been playing.
But, I mean, the way the Ravens just punked the Lions, do you think it's their division right now? Or the Browns clearly can still play this type of football too, Joe?
Yeah, they're going to have a hard time keeping up with the Ravens without Deshaun Watson playing good football at quarterback, because Lamar Jackson's probably playing his best football right now.
Right.
And that's a complete team. I thought the Lions were the most balanced team in the NFL. I thought that they were a team that would be able to keep up with the Philadelphia Eagles, because they played a physical style, because they've got great offensive and defensive lines. But the way the Ravens just handled them, I'm a little nervous for my Brownies, because this Ravens team is legit, and they might be the most balanced team now in the NFL outside of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Joe, you're the man. I said this to you that night when I saw you. Your speech was awesome. How was the day? I mean, now that you're, weeks, months removed from your induction, well, what is your memories so far?
Still riding high, Rich. That moment from the Gold Jacket dinner when my kids came on stage and surprised me and hugged me, it's probably going to go down when I'm sitting in my rocker as the greatest moment of my life. And I actually have the picture right here over my shoulder.
What do you got?
Print off.
Oh,
right here. It's of course shiny, because my light guy sucks over here. He's getting fired along with my hair and makeup. But yeah, that's the moment right there. My 4 kids surprised me, because they told us that family was not allowed on stage, and we could take a picture right when we got off stage. But being the last person and being, in my hometown. I feel like they bent
Yeah.
the rules a little bit for me. And so when I was on stage and they rushed up and they kind of tackled me from behind, and my youngest daughter, Reese, who's 5, just jumps up into my arms. And you could see in that picture, she was so embarrassed by being in front of the crowd. She just buried her head in tears.
Yeah, she's
into
bawling.
my neck.
It was beautiful.
Bawling. And then my son's holding my hand and just looking into the crowd like, yeah, who wants some? Because he's a little football player, so he's got that football mindset. And my daughter started looking up just with pride. I mean, it
was beautiful. It was a beautiful moment. It was, I had the view from the podium on down, and it was just beautiful to watch. And I'm glad you were surprised because, Joe, it was only turnabout that you surprised everyone. You chose a Steeler and Jerome Bettis to put the jacket on you. Why'd you do that? I mean, a lot of Browns fans were like, wait a minute, are we being punked right around here? He's choosing a Steeler here in Canton, Ohio. But why'd you choose JB? Why'd you choose him?
I felt that the Steeler setting the table for me was the best way to do it. But no, Jerome Bettis been a friend of mine for a long time since I got in the NFL. Same agents. And I've always had a lot of respect how he carried himself, how he conducted himself, how he gave back to his community in Detroit and Pittsburgh. And as a player, take the helmet off. He was one of my favorite players of all time. And I felt like it was such an honor going into the Hall of Fame, becoming a member of the Gold Jacket team instead of Steelers and Browns. It was symbolic in my head of kind of breaking down those barriers and becoming teammates. And I just had so much pride being able to be on that stage with such a great human being like Jerome Bettis.
You're the man, Joe. That was beautiful. I'm glad that we had a chance to review it weeks later, and thanks for the time here. I'd love to have you back on as the season goes on so I could hear your thoughts, and plus there's lots more things I'm curious about on your walls. So we
there's a lot of stuff back there. So I appreciate you having me on, Rich.
You got it. That's Joe Thomas, a Pro Football Hall of Famer through and through, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.